Welcome to the show where we talk all things sales, marketing, and helping you win the game. My name is Natalie, and I'm sitting here talking to Greg Ross, the expert sales trainer and coach with about 2 decades of successful experience in sales. Our topic for discussion today is why every account executive needs to improve their discovery calls. We all know that this is super important. So now, during your time training account executives or sales reps, whatever level it may be, you focus a lot on this discovery call. Why is that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I've professionally scored and evaluated billions of discovery calls. Okay. Like that's when you're a sales trainer in the corporate world, that's how you spend a lot of your time. It's not all glitz and glamour in front of the room, like, speaking in front of a screen. It's actually a lot of scoring, evaluating, listening to recordings that have been submitted. So what I found was that 98% of the account executives that I've personally trained did not have a solid foundation of training when it came to discovery calls. And as a result of that, they actually lose a lot of deals. So because they're not finding out until later in the process, right? This is a multi-call process as you're working with these prospects from discovery call to close. You don't necessarily know right away that you blew it and you lost the deal. And so what that leads to is a lot of confusion, as you can imagine, Natalie, where people don't really understand, salespeople don't understand where they went wrong. So I've heard them come to me and say, Greg, I'm having a really difficult time with my negotiation skills. I'm not closing many deals, or I'm having a tough time with proposals. And then when I do an analysis, I'm like, whoa, that's not your problem at all. You actually lost this thing way back on the discovery call. And that happens so often. And there were so many people that scored. I mean, if I'm scoring them on a 1 to 10 basis, they're getting 2s out of 10, 98% of the time on that discovery call. So that's where the problem is. Trust me, if you're one of those people that's losing deals, it's happening more than likely on the discovery call. This is where deals get won or lost. So it's just really, really important that we get this right.
Yeah, I think you just broke a lot of necks because you caught a lot of attention on that. Because I can personally say, I think we've all experienced that point in time, like where you thought it was in the bag, you told somebody it was in the bag, and then you're trying to figure out where you lost it. And so I already know that this is going to bring so much value to so many people because this is something where everyone can improve on, and it's so interesting. And with that being said, you've picked 3 areas that you really focus on when you're training. And so how did you pick these areas? Can you tell us a little bit more about them, and why are they so important?
Yeah, so today we'll be focused on 3 areas where most of our viewers will likely need the most improvement. This is me with my expertise as a professional trainer, really trying to hone this in, guys, on what's going to give you the most value as you're watching this. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today, Natalie, we'll talk about the importance of tailoring your presentation to your audience. We have a tendency as salespeople to want to take the easy way out, kind of the lazy way out. And as a result of that, I see a ton of generic discovery calls. If you want to be a top performer in sales, I know there's a tendency, like, I don't know if it's a human nature thing or what, but there's this tendency to become like Homer Simpson, where you're sitting at your desk pushing the same button over and over again. And there's a certain comfort zone there, but that's not going to cut it. If you want to be a top performer, we need to get you to break out of that comfort zone and do things a little bit differently. So hopefully what this show does is gives you a launch pad where you know now what you need to improve on, and you can make it a little bit better.
Yeah, I don't think we want to go back to 11th grade where we're all sitting in our desks just watching the teacher click through slides. So we're not doing that. But okay, so what is the second element to all of this?
Yeah, so you're right. We don't want to be like Homer Simpson, just sitting at our desk at the nuclear power plant, pressing the same button over and over and over again. And I think that's like a little bit of human nature, Natalie, because people, especially if they didn't want to be in sales to begin with, they're kind of looking for this comfort zone. But to be a top performer, you have to push out of that comfort zone. Differentiating yourself is the name of the game. So that kind of leads to the second thing that I'm going to be focused on, which is time management. So I'll discuss the key components that must be present in order for you to have a truly excellent discovery call. Like, we're going to list those out for the people watching. And some of these might be a surprise to some people. Also, you're probably wondering, if you're watching this, why I'm framing this in the context of time management, which this definitely is a time management thing. like versus, for example, the components of a successful discovery call? Well, that's because most account executives run out of time and they just aren't able to close the call properly, which leads to abysmal close loss rates, right? If you want to have a high close won rate, conversion rate on these calls, you need to have a successful close to the discovery call in particular. It's really important. So I want everyone, as they're watching this, to start getting used to thinking about it that way. Think of yourself like a race car driver and I'm holding the stopwatch and we're timing your laps, right? Like you have to, the discovery call is just as much about time management as it is about making sure that everything's there and you know, that you have all the effective components. So you need to make sure you land the plane on time and nothing gets skipped, because if you skip even one of my recommended components, Natalie, you're likely to lose the deal at a lot higher.
I love it. And I'm so happy that you're going through and mentioning, you know, all these little details, because right where you said it at the beginning, so many of us wonder where we lost the deal. And it was at the very beginning. All it began with when we thought it was in the bag, you know, we thought we were bringing home the dough, and we could not be further from the truth. So I'm excited to see where this is going to go. And, you know, maybe people can figure out where exactly they lost things. This will give them some extra clarity, right?
I hope so. And there's one other topic that we'll touch on towards the end of the show, which is also really important. And it's a little bit of like a cliffhanger, kind of a, you know, little treat for people that watch to the end, but we'll talk about where deals actually go to die. So we'll talk about the number one place that I see the deal die. And it's in the discovery call, spoiler alert. But I mean, I've worked for, you know, a dozen different organizations. I've consulted with, you know, several dozen startups. And every time it's like the same place that these deals die, on the exact same place. Like you could paint an X on the floor. So this is just the number one killer of deals that I've seen over and over again. And as a top performing sales rep, also, I had to figure out a way personally in my journey to push through this and make sure that they didn't die there. So I think that's going to be really helpful to most of the people watching. And hopefully it will empower them to do what I was able to do, which is get your close one conversion rate really high, because your deals are surviving past a discovery call.
I think everybody's super hyped about this. I am, because nobody wants to be there sitting through a presentation, watching the teachers just click the button to go to the next slide. And we definitely don't want to end up in the graveyard. What can account executives do to break out of the trap of giving the same generic presentation over and over again? Let's start there.
So you don't want to give a generic presentation ever. And I know, you know, when you're a new account executive, especially, there's pressure on you, Natalie, to use the company approved slide deck, right? They kind of don't like you making a lot of changes to it or whatever. And it's actually possible to do this without changing any of your slides. But what you really want to do is you want to differentiate yourself. And this is my common theme. Like, this is the heartbeat of all of the sales training and coaching that I do. You want to be a trusted advisor, an expert in the eyes of your prospects. You want them to view you not as some salesperson trying to sell them something, but as a trusted advisor, someone that they can trust to make recommendations. Number one, sales is built on trust. You can't sell anyone anything unless they trust you. That's just a fact, right? Number two, nobody ever wakes up in the morning wanting to buy software or technology or your services. They wake up in the morning wanting to solve challenges that they're having in their business, right? Think about the times that you, watching this video, have purchased something to help you overcome a challenge that you had in your life, right? It's the same thing. So the first thing that I recommend doing here is a little bit of research. Now, what I recommend doing is spending 3 to 5 minutes. The first time you do this, it's going to be like 20 minutes, okay? Because you're not used to building this muscle. But I promise you, if you commit to it, it'll get you to the place where you can do it in 3 to 5 minutes. But you want to go on their website, the prospect's website, and you want to look for executive priorities. What's important to their top executives? Are they talking about culture? Are they talking about hiring? Are they talking about shifts in the macroeconomic landscape? Like, what are they talking about, right? What are their top thinkers thinking about? And how can we tie in what we're selling to those executive priorities, right? Now, a defined initiative is something that we're looking for, where not just are they pontificating about it on stage as a top leader, but now they've told their team, we want you to do something about this. We're assigning budget to this initiative. We're assigning a team to handle this, right? Like an example would be like a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative where they hire someone to come into the company, and that's what they do. That's their job, right? And they build a team and they have a budget, and then they go through this series of recommendations and changes to the organization, right? That's a defined initiative. So you can find those just by looking at the prospect's company website, right? Or their company LinkedIn profile. We're also looking for two other things commonly. Trigger events. Are they, opening a new office in Switzerland? Are they laying off 1,000 workers? Like, what's happening? What's a trigger that we're looking at? And news articles. Have they been in the news recently, right? These are all good ways of building that body of research that lead to one thing. It leads to you figuring out what is the challenge, the one challenge that you're focusing on initially, that your software, your services, your technology, your offering can help them overcome. And that becomes your hypothesis. The hypothesis is your statement, you being able to articulate that into words to explain to them what that challenge is and how you're going to help them solve it.
Oh, I love that. Basically, you're telling people how to bring their secret sauce, bring the A game. And honestly, it's like just building an automatic connection the moment that you start having that conversation, because you know what they need. You're cued into the conversation. I love that. And you can't do that if you're just bringing a generic slideshow in and reading from the slide. And so I think that is such a valuable tip. And but you said something about a hypothesis. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that aspect and how people can incorporate that into their A game?
Yeah, the word hypothesis, it's an awfully scientific term to be used in an industry like sales, right? So that's something that people kind of like, I've noticed makes them a little nervous. So let me just explain what I mean by a hypothesis. It's very, very simple, right? You're coming to the conversation on your discovery call with a position. It's that simple. You have a position on how what you're selling is going to impact them, the challenges that they're facing, and it doesn't have to be a challenge, Natalie. It could be like a critical goal that they have in mind that you're helping them accomplish more efficiently, more effectively, with less risk, by spending less money, right? That's all valuable. But you should have an idea of what's the one thing that I've found, the challenge or the goal that I'm focusing on, to really show them that we can actually provide value to them. Again, this is going back to, I'm a trusted advisor. I'm not just trying to sell you something, but I can actually add value, right? And that is the key thing that's critical, that's going to get them really interested in what you have to say. And I actually have like an example of what that might sound like in your discovery call. Would you like to hear it?
Yes, please. I think everybody would love to hear that. Let's hear it.
Okay, cool. So if you were the prospect, I would say something like this. So Natalie, thanks for meeting with me today. Here's the agenda for our discovery call. Based on the research that I did, I took a look at your website and I dug into some industry articles and white papers. I've noticed that you are hiring 1,000 new employees in the state of California for your California location. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're expanding. We are rapidly growing.
That's amazing. So, in the conversations I've had with other, folks like you who are VPs of human resources, I've noticed that there's usually a key challenge that they needed to overcome to make that kind of change a success when they're bringing on so many new people into an organization, right? And that challenge is usually that they can't scale their employee training program, their new hire training program, right? So what we were able to do, and this is why I was so excited to meet with you today, we were able to actually help them overcome that challenge through the use of our HR software, which handles all of the onboarding, all of the training of new employees on demand and through the cloud, right? So it's really, really simple. And what that was able to do, Natalie, was help folks like you to scale your new hire training and onboarding and do it effectively, even though you're now bringing on this copious amount of new people, right?
They're phenomenal. I mean, at the end of the day, I hope people see just how amazing and how simply that you can just add this into the conversation and you're serving and you're bringing value. And that's what it really is. You're recognizing the problem, and maybe it's not a problem. Maybe it's something like you're rapidly growing and it's how can I make that process easier for them with what I'm bringing to the table? I love that. That is so genius. So, okay, they're having this conversation. You have your hypothesis about how you are going to help them, how you can either help them in out of a negative situation where you're going to bring their A game up, or, you're going to help them during this massive like expansion process. So this is
Yes.
really exciting, but there's a lot going on during that process. What other tips do you have when this is going on that can really help someone be successful moving forward, just even from this initial point of the call?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we've laid out our hypothesis, right, which now in their eyes makes us look like we've done some research, like we're intelligent, right? We have a position on how we can add value. Now, I get people that they're a little bit worried because they say, "Well, Greg, what if I do this research and I create a hypothesis and it's wrong?" Right? I'm focused on the wrong area. Or they say something like, well, actually, we've already got that figured out. We have software we just purchased that can help do that. Well, that can happen, right? And it rarely happens, but it can happen. So when you form a hypothesis, you come to the call with a position, that discovery call, and you're wrong, something actually amazing happens. They'll usually say something like, no, that's not a top concern for us. We actually already have that handled. But you now have built your personal brand. You've won their respect because you've shown them that you genuinely care about their business. You're making recommendations. And 9 times out of 10, here's what they do. But let me tell you some of the other challenges that we're having, because now they want to bring those challenges to you and they want to see if what you're selling can help with that, right? So just to kind of round out this concept of the hypothesis, I just want to assure people it's okay if you get it wrong. If you try and you get it wrong, that's fine. But what really counts here is that human element, showing them that we care, we're willing to spend time to do the research, and that we know a thing or two about their business, right? And that's important. The other thing that's really important, which leads into your question, is what else do we need to do, right, to really firmly establish that respect from them right up front. We need to know who is in what I call the buying. Okay, the buying committee is the group of 6 to 8 people who are involved in that decision-making process to purchase the technology, the product, the software, the offering, the services, whatever it is that you're selling, right? So we've talked about this before, Natalie, but most of the people right now that are buying things like software, for example, they're millennials, right? So back in the day, one of the riskiest things you could do is purchase software and then have it be a flop. It didn't work. It created massive problems for the company, right? In fact, it got so bad that back in the day, and you hear people like Neil Rackham talk about this. He's the author of Spin Selling. He's kind of one of the foundational voices in the sales industry. But IBM actually had this philosophy where their whole sales pitch was like, hey, nobody ever got fired for purchasing IBM products, right? It's like this really safe kind of choice. So, and since then, you've heard it repeated about other large organizations, companies, well-established companies, right? So that actually became like a sales pitch for a lot of organizations. It's like, hey, you can go with a cheaper solution, but we're not risky. You can go with us and you're not going to get fired because of that. Well, millennials are very smart. If you're out there and you're a millennial, congratulations, because you guys actually cracked this code and figured this out. They now make these buying decisions in packs, right? So now you'll see millennials buying software and they're bringing 4, 6, 8 people in on the decision-making process. They're getting their boss, the chief marketing officer, involved in the conversation. They're getting the VPs of marketing involved in the conversation, the directors, some of the managers, and 1 or 2 of the associates, right? And because they're buying by committee, it actually reduces a lot of that risk from somebody making a poor decision. Well, guess what? As a seller, that can make your life miserable, because if you're only talking to one person throughout that process, then you don't have control of that sale or that conversation, and you're going to lose a lot of those deals because you don't have all of the people at the table who are really making a decision when it comes to that. So my other recommendation, when you're positioning yourself on that discovery call, do a little research, figure out who those other buying committee members are, write it down, and be prepared to reference them by name, so that as you're going through this process after the discovery call, towards the end of the discovery call, you can recommend, or even before the discovery call happens, even better, you can say, hey, I noticed that Cindy is your chief marketing officer and Deborah and June are your VPs of marketing. We usually invite them in on these conversations. Can we invite them to the discovery call, right? And now, if you can get what I call multi-threaded on the deal, you have more than one person, your chances of closing that deal, if you have at least 3 people involved in the process from discovery to close, your chances of closing that deal climb by 40 to 70%.
I mean, that is a huge percentage too. I mean, that's a big tip that, I mean, some people may not even be doing that at all right now. And that's something when you bring in other people to, help with the process and, talk to them about how, again, you're bringing value to them. A lot of those people, they all have different opinions, different perspectives on certain things. And it can
Totally.
even open up a little extra dialogue where it honestly builds a little bit of extra trust there as a whole in a group. And so, like, I think we had mentioned in the past, with millennials, you don't buy a dress, at least as a girl, you're not going to buy a dress without asking your friends. And this is the same concept, you guys. It's brilliant.
Yes.
You're basically bringing all the friends to the table and you're getting them to buy in. You're winning the trust. You have the hypothesis where you're bringing all this value in. I mean, you've really brought this full circle.
100%. And, it used to be that we would say that the status quo was the main reason why we would lose deals, because people were afraid to leave their little safety bubble of the status quo. But what research now is actually showing is that that's not really the main reason that people don't buy. It's not actually a fear of leaving the status quo. It's actually a fear of failure and the risk involved in making a decision that wastes time, that wastes money, or that costs time and money because it's a bad decision. So that absolutely de-risks the buying process for them. And as a seller, if you understand how to research, find the buying committee members and proactively mention them by name and invite them to the calls, you're much more likely to close the deal. There's one more thing, Natalie, before we get on to the next topic that I just want to touch on really, really quickly.
Yeah, please do. Let's hear it.
You're probably going to laugh when you hear this. This is so stupid, but I swear it's...
No, it can't be. It cannot be after what you just told us. It's got to be.
This is so ridiculous. See, well, you would think it's a no-brainer, like people just do this.
I
Right?
don't know.
I've seen behind the curtain. You can't fool me, salespeople. So I know what you're doing and not doing. So believe it or not, the note-taking is so critical in these initial discovery conversations because you're asking discovery questions. You're getting them to talk about their challenges. I've literally been on hour-long calls, great conversation. A week later, we're prepping for a demo. I asked the account executive to pull up their notes and they got nothing. Or they have just the most bizarre, obscure notes, or they can't read their handwriting. Listen, don't laugh. I know if you're watching this video, I know there's some conviction there, okay? If I looked at your spiral notepad, I guarantee right now there's a bunch of chicken scratch on there.
You don't want to see mine.
Oh, totally. Like this, people don't realize this, but this is actually a skill that you have to learn to take good notes, right? Now, if you've been to college, you know this. There's people that don't know how to take notes, and then there's people that take note-taking courses because it's so important, right? So the same is true in sales. If you're not taking good notes, you're not going to be effective in terms of your command and control over that conversation from call to call to call. You have to understand what challenges you've discussed, how your product or your offering solves those challenges, who made what comments about how painful those challenges were. And you have to be able to recap that on every call because you're inviting new people onto those calls that have no clue what was discussed during the last call. So the note taking is that final piece that really has to be on point.
That is such a special tip that I think can easily be overlooked, especially because we're talking about, personalizing the presentation, getting to know people at the round table, making the decision. And so you think you have everything right in front of you, you're good to go, but then you walk away from the table and I don't know about anyone else watching this. I can speak for myself. Like, there's so much going on in today's society. If you're not taking notes and you don't have things written down, I don't even know if it would take me an hour later to forget something so crucial that could be such a game changer for, your next conversation. And so I am so glad that you mentioned something like that because that is such a tiny detail that can make such a big impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, that's amazing. My mind's blown. So that's something I wouldn't expect for us to cover on this. So much value. Thank you for sharing this with us. But okay, I have to know, we're talking about all these different value elements that can really make this call phenomenal. But you did mention time management earlier. So let's talk about time management and why that's important and how that correlates with everything that you just spoke about.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great segue. So when it comes to time management, what I'm really going to be talking about here are like the fundamental elements that have to be there in a discovery call to make it effective, right? But I'm framing it, we're viewing it through the lens of time management, because if you run out of time by taking too long in one of these areas, you won't get all of the things done that you need to do in 30 to 60 minutes to close the call effectively, right? So let's talk about what milestones need to happen as we're racing around the track of our discovery call. Like, what are the points that we need to make sure that we hit, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing, and this is hit or miss, I see this maybe like 20 to 30% of the time, which is crazy, because this is just a classical sales training thing that everybody should. You really need to start your discovery calls, salespeople, with a clear agenda. Okay, you need to talk about the introduction, right, where everyone gets to introduce themselves and talk about their function at the company, right, including you and your team. You need to plan time for question and answer. You need to talk about their challenges, right? You need to close for next steps. If you're giving a demonstration of their product, that needs to happen too. And what I recommend is putting a little in parentheses the number of minutes it's going to take for you to get through each of those, right? That's just a really clear thing that has to happen at the beginning of each discovery call. And also, I really like the technique of asking them, hey, Natalie, do we still have 30 minutes for the call today? Do you have a hard stop at, the bottom of the hour? And get that confirmation from them, because if you run out of time, you lost the call, right? So that's really important.
Absolutely.
Now, after the agenda is done, we talked about that introduction with the hypothesis, right? Where you are showing them, and I recommend having a slide for this, some bullet points on what are the trigger events you found? What are the quotes that you found? Like, what are the challenges that you found them discussing on a YouTube video or in a white paper, right? Or whatever, article.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Yeah, you want to have that on a slide if you can. And then this is where you talk about the research you've done, you lay out your hypothesis, you talk about your conversations with other companies similar to theirs in the same industry, other titles similar to theirs, right? If you're talking to a VP of marketing, tell them about some challenges you helped other VPs of marketing solve. If you're new in sales and you don't have that, borrow from your company, right? Lean on their experience to set that credibility. Then you want to make the presentation to them. This is kind of the slide component, right? Where you're clicking through slides and you're showing them the screenshots of your product and, the core pillars of your business and what your product's designed to solve. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. You need to think about your hypothesis here, right? Really channel that hypothesis. You need to think about what are the challenges you can help them solve, right? Those should be value propositions for you, for your company and your product, okay? Those are areas that you can add the most value. What you need is a question, a discovery question, to open that challenge up for conversation. Now, how many of those challenges do you need to close the deal? You need 2 to 3. Identify and discuss before the end of the call. So you're going to pre-plan some discovery questions. And I tell my students this, pretend like your discovery questions are arrows and you only have so many in your quiver, right? If you're firing those arrows, make sure you're aiming really well and you're hitting a target and it's doing something meaningful, right? You don't just want to fire arrows up in the air, right? So this is really critical, because people get on these calls, the buyers, and they have expectations. They expect to learn something about your product, your service, right? And they expect to see it in action on a demonstration. You're expecting to ask some questions and discover some pain points and connect the dots. So all people have to be happy, right? So instead of asking 20 questions up front, which I see a lot of rookie sales reps do, where they open the call and they spend 35 minutes asking questions, and then they have 10 minutes to do the demo and close the call. It's ridiculous. Instead of doing that, that's bad. So if you're doing that today, stop right now. That's the last time we're doing that. We're not front loading discovery questions. Now what I want you to do is pick 3 good questions. And I want you to find that place in your presentation where you're going to ask those questions, right? Those questions should be aligned with the challenges they're having and the value you provide to solve those challenges, bridging that gap, right? Now, you need to get them talking about it too. You need to get them talking about how wonderful it's going to be when you solve those challenges for them. So there's a couple ways you can do that. There's a method called spin selling that I highly recommend. There's a book by Professor Neil Rackham. It's very good, where you ask a need payoff question, something like this. How would that feel if we were able to completely solve that challenge for you? And then they say something like, go ahead, Natalie, help me out with
Oh
this.
my gosh, I would not even have to drive home work with me on the weekend. I would actually get to go to happy hour with my colleagues. It's a game changer.
Absolutely. When you hear that, you know that you've done your job of identifying the right challenge. They're convinced that you can solve it, and now you're winning the deal, right? But we need them talking about it, not you necessarily. They need to say it, right? Now, here's the other thing. This is a pro tip for you guys. When you're going through your call and you're clicking through your slides, you get into what I call presentation mode, right? You have a plan, you're working your plan. You're clicking, just like Homer Simpson pushing the buttons.
Yeah.
But you're going to get to a point where they're going to say, oh, can you back it up one slide? I just want to see that slide previously for a second. Oh, sure, the rookie sales rep says. They back it up one slide. They wait a few seconds. Okay, did you see what you needed to see? Yeah, I think so. Thanks. Now you can go ahead. And they proceed with the presentation. Guys, I want you to imagine there's an emergency brake, okay? Now, a lot of modern cars have really fancy emergency brakes, but when I was learning how to drive, we had like a handle that you had to pull up, right?
I envision in my head doing a donut in the parking lot, everything you're not supposed to do. I just imagine chaos in this moment.
Yeah, so this is what we call the handbrake. This is how drifting was invented, right? So to your point. So when you hear the prospect jump in and talk to you and you didn't ask them a question and you didn't ask them to say anything, you need to pull that emergency brake on your sale, and because there's something there that they saw or some question that they have that is going to move the needle in terms of their confidence that your solution is going to work for them and solve their challenges. So when that happens, whatever it is, if they jump in and they say something, instead of staying in presentation mode, you need to stop, pull that emergency brake, bring the sales car to a stop and say something like this. Hey, Natalie, I'm happy to back it up one slide, but why do you ask? Is there something you wanted to see specifically?
Yeah.
Try to coax it out of them, right?
Okay, so it's good because I was going to say, well, okay, so someone says, oh, what about this? And we're talking about time management here. And so how do you ensure that you're staying within your time clock, that you're staying on track? Is that something that you would recommend, just asking a good clarifying question to make sure that, everything is still smooth sailing? What would you recommend?
Yeah. Now this is an unscripted question, right? So you're right. You're jumping into your process and you're kind of getting off track. But what I've found is that's usually the thing that's really important to them. So even if you have to sacrifice one of your other questions for time's sake, I would definitely stop everything and ask why they want to go back one slide and see that thing, or why they asked that question about that certain drop-down menu, and try to figure out not just the topic, why that's interesting to them, but is there pain there? Is there a challenge there that they want to see because it's going to help make their life easier, less risky, make them more money, or help them spend less money.
Brilliant. And I love how you called it the emergency brake too, because that could be like a very clarifying moment in the entire presentation. And
Yes.
that's definitely something you don't want to glaze over. And I'm sure that could even actually help. Such a good tip. And definitely, I can see how that would just, honestly, it's almost like you're putting the bow on top of the package, because you're just making those clarifying statements that really do make the world a difference. You wouldn't want to go past that. I loved how you called it the emergency brake too. Adds a little chaos to the situation. People are not going to forget that. I love it. But okay, so I assume you're making that the clarification there. Are you moving to closing next, or how does this process flow? What do you do next after someone throws something on you where you have to pull the emergency brake?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So now we're headed into the close. We set a great agenda. We started with a hypothesis, right? We built credibility. We made our presentation. We had some really good pre-planned discovery questions throughout. We've identified 2 to 3 critical challenges or goals that we're helping them solve or accomplish through the use of our offering, right? And hopefully we've gotten them talking about how wonderful it's going to be when they're able to solve those challenges. Remember that co-authoring is really important. Now it's time to close the call. Regardless of what happens, you need to leave yourself about 5 minutes to close the call. That sounds like a lot of time, but it's true. And this is where I see a lot of reps really make a big mistake, because they try to close the call in 30 seconds. You're having a great conversation. You get to the end, right? You try to close in 30 seconds, and then something like this happens. The prospect says, yeah, Demo looked good, Greg. I think we're very impressed. I know we're out of time and we have to get out of this conference room because someone else has it reserved. So we'll shoot you an email and we'll, get a next call on the calendar. Thanks a lot. And then they're gone. And then you're sitting there and you're like, oh man, that did not feel good. I just poured so much of my heart and soul into this thing. And now I did not calendar a next step before the end of the call, a cardinal sales sin that I've committed. And you feel it when this happens to you. So
it almost felt like a bad date. Like it's like you had a really good date and the other person just jet on you. I feel this right now. It's resonating, right?
100%. There's so many similarities between sales and dating. It would blow you away.
Oh, that's a whole other conversation. Yeah, no.
It's so true. So listen, if that's you, if that's happened to you, don't worry. This is what you do to fix that, right? You watch the clock. And when you get to the 5-minute mark before the end of the call, I don't care what you're doing, you stop everything. Now, I had an old boss that used to say, and I agree with this. He's like, Greg, if you're having good discovery and you're getting a lot of challenges from them and you're having a good conversation, you don't even have to do the demo. You don't have to even show them the product. Book another call for that, like that. And that's okay. But you need to have the forethought to know that. What you don't want to do is run out of time, have everyone jump off, and there's no clear leadership there, right? So, if you're having a great call, you can ask them, do you have a hard stop? We have 5 minutes left. Can we talk for another 15 minutes? You can do that. You can say, hey, we wanted to get to the demo today, but we had such a great conversation. And I think you feel that way too, that we just didn't get to it. Let's put that on the calendar, right? You can do that. What you absolutely don't want to do is you don't want to just let them go helter-skelter with no clear next steps and no leadership of what's going to happen on the next call, right? So at that 5-minute mark, when you see that you're about to run out of time, here's what you need to do. Stop and go to a recap. Ask every prospect that's on the call to give you their thoughts on what they've seen so far, right? Now, if it's only one person, great. Get them to tell you their thoughts about what they've seen. If it's 5 people on the call, literally go person by person and have everybody tell you their thoughts. Why? Because they may love it or hate it. If one person hates it, that can sabotage your sales. So you really need to know that before you close the call, right? Now, hopefully, if you've done your job, if you built, credibility with them and they see you as a trusted advisor and you've done a good job of asking about their challenges and you've shown them that you can solve them, this is the point where you're going to get a unanimous round of applause from the people on the call. They're going to say things like, yeah, really love the software. I could see how this is going to help us, and you can help them along. Like, hey, remember, Natalie, you told me you were having the challenge of bringing on 1,000 new employees. Can you see now that we did the demo, how exactly this is going to help you fix that and solve it? And then they tell you like, yeah, right. This is really great. I'm excited. So you can kind of prompt them on a little bit, but you want to get everyone to speak openly and freely about what they thought about your product or about the conversation so far. Very important.
So we always challenge you real quick. I'm cutting you off a little bit, but I'm sure the viewers are wondering, what if you do have a negative Nancy at the table and you've got this 5 minutes left? You don't want to ruin the end of the date. How do you fix that?
Well, you'll be really happy that you gave yourself 5 minutes because what I've learned is that human beings are just horrible communicators. I mean, we really are. We're just really, really bad communicators. And even when we think we made something really clear, and even when somebody co-authored to us that they can see how that's exciting, it's going to solve the challenge. Brad, who now, no offense, Brad, if you're watching, Brad, who now hates the product, might have been over there eating a Subway sandwich with his camera turned off, not paying attention at all, right? So this is where you have an opportunity to, if you need to, jump back in, or you reference Susie, who loved it because she saw how it fixed it, and you really get them to open up. And also, if that person that hated the software, that didn't like it, that has something negative to say, if they're subordinate, a lot of times what you see happen is the leader on the call will jump over top of them and say, yeah, Brad, I understand that's important to you, but I think like the consensus from the group is that it's going to really help us with the challenge. So you actually see that buying committee working to your advantage. But that's where you will take a few minutes just to stop if you need to and reset that expectation with that person, because it may be as simple as they just misunderstood, or they missed that part, or they didn't really understand when you explained it to them the first time. right?
Yeah, so that five extra minutes at the end is so crucial, and again, game changer. That's a good tip.
Yeah, yeah, it's really critical. Now, what will usually happen if you've done a good job up until that point of being a trusted advisor, asking good questions, uncovering challenges, is that everybody's going to generally love what you had to show them, and they're going to be really happy with the conversation, right? So that's when you want to get into the budget and the authority and the timeline questions. Now, in the old days, we called this BANT, right? Now, you've already taken care of the N, which stands for needs, because of the conversation. You figured out what's important to them, what their needs are, and you've proved to them that you can solve those needs, right? So really all that's left for us is budget, the B, authority, the A, and the timeline, which is the T. So my budget question at the end of the call is usually something like this. Natalie, is there a budget identified for this project? And here's why I'm asking. And that's the important thing to do, because if you just ask if they have a budget or how much the budget is, they're not going to want to tell you. Do you have any idea why they wouldn't want to tell you what their budget is, Natalie? Why do you think that would be?
I would think because what if they had someone on the back burner, like somebody like your competition, and they told you, maybe you gave them a dollar amount, or I gave you a dollar amount, and I would just think that, I don't know, that would almost be giving so much away, some of their leverage, maybe. Am I on point?
Yeah, that's part of it. And also, like, think about the last car that you purchased, right? If you went to the car dealership and the car salesman came to you and said, Natalie, how much you looking to spend on a car? And you say, I've got $10,000. Guess what? You're spending $10,000, even if it's on a $7,000 car, right? So this is kind of like the oldest trick in the book, and buyers have gotten wise to that. So you'll find that they really don't want to tell you how much money is in their budget usually. So, but I found a little hack which actually gets you past that. And here's what it is. Natalie, is there a budget identified for this project? And here's why I'm asking. Let me explain why I'm asking. Because I'm going to create a proposal for you. It sounds like you love the software, and I need to have the features configured in a way that does what I showed you it will do today, right? And so it helps if I understand what the guardrails are on your budget, because if your budget's lower than the price that I'm going to configure with these features, then we may have to sacrifice some functionality because of that. I just want to make sure that you're happy and I'm able to give you the things that we talked about that were so important to you today, right?
I love that. It's a brilliant add-on. It really is. You're still meeting them where they're at. You're not taking the trash off the table. Love that.
Yes. Yeah, and it makes them comfortable. This is actually like a really killer secret in sales. If you just explain why you're asking a question, oftentimes it puts people at ease and they're more likely to give you an honest answer. So you're not going to hear them say something like, yeah, our budget's $10,000, but they might say something like this. Well, how much do you think it's going to cost? And then you can give them a range, right? Which might be a little bit higher than what it's actually going to cost. You don't want to make it lower because that number will be permanently burned into their memory. So you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot, but it'll start a conversation where you'll get them to say, yeah, okay, you're saying it's going to cost $8,000. That's in our budget. And now they have budget. That there's not going to be this is too expensive objection coming down the road, right?
Well, I like that, because you're also saying, you're not just saying how much money do you have to give me. You're also saying I care about what you need, what you have, and I also want to accommodate that as well. It's not just like, let's see what's in your pockets. I love that extra aspect on something that really could make a huge difference, even at the end. I think that's memorable for somebody that's in charge of budgeting and everything like that. That's a good tip.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the next thing we're going to ask them is, who's the ultimate signing authority on this evaluation, right? Who is it that you would need to get the contract signed by? And that's going to tell us who that critical person is that we need to get on one of these calls. Because if we can get that person on one of the calls and we can show them the software, then we've got the sale in the bag, more than likely. If we don't, then that's the person who may say no, who has not seen any of the value, has not participated in any of the conversations, and who is just going to look at the price tag and make a yes or no decision. And guess what, Natalie? It's going to be no most of the time, right? So it's really critical that we ask that question and we understand who that person is that's going to be signing on the dotted line. That's the person we need on the calls.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I have to ask a question there too. What if you can't get that person on the call?
Well, sometimes you can't. But I think the key is you have to try everything to get them on the calls, right? And there are some, that's probably a separate show, but there's some really cool little tricks that you can use to help get that person on a call, including leveraging your manager, your sales leadership team at your company to reach out to them directly for an executive touch. So there's some really cool things you can do there. That's probably like a whole nother conversation, but yeah, you're right. Sometimes you just won't be able to, but for now, let's just all agree on the fact that you should try.
I'm
Like, that's
I'm
definitely-
Brian. Am I Brian at the table right now and just asking all the devil's advocate questions?
Yeah,
I
love
like
it.
that though. That's a good point. So, okay, we've asked who the authority of the head honcho in the room is, who we need. What
Yes.
comes next? You've got a flow here. I love it. This is good structure that people can really take away with.
Yeah, you're right. And guess what? This is a really great thing to write on your note-taking sheet, right? Budget, authority, timeline, right? So the next question is the timeline. When would you like to go live with our solution? Now, you asked me before the show, when do you know to pull the ripcord or that it might not be a good fit, right? So software, actually, you have implementation times. It might take 30 days to 90 days to 6 months in some cases to get software configured and up and running for the customer. Well, if they say they want to have it running by next Friday, then that's a big problem, because it's a good problem to have because they obviously like the software, they want to buy it, right? But their timeline is just way too aggressive. There's no way that you can get it done in time to make them happy. So that's an example of something that you need to flush out before you get to the signature on the contract, because if they're expecting to have it working in a week and up and running, but it takes you 6 weeks to do that, then those are expectations that are not being met, and you need to pump the brakes on that, and you need to make sure you're in alignment before you move forward, right?
Yeah, that's a good detail for sure. I mean, think about it. You have an amazing call, you step away from the call, and then realize your timelines are so completely opposite, and then you have this just huge dumpster fire that you're going to figure out how to fix. Amazing, amazing tip.
Yeah, and the last thing, this you don't hear this very often. This is a little pro tip for you guys. So when you are dealing with a group of individuals that are looking to buy software, and remember we talked about a defined initiative where they've assigned budget to a project. There's a team assigned to it, right? They have an evaluation criteria of things they're looking for, right? Given to them usually by their leader, right? Or that they come up with internally. Well, why couldn't we just ask for a copy of their evaluation criteria? They created this evaluation criteria to make sure they checked all the boxes in order to figure out which vendor to go with. I think that's fair game. So a question that I like to ask is, do you all have an evaluation criteria in writing? And if you do, can I get a copy of it? Because as we progress through these calls, I want to make sure that I show you definitively how we're a yes in each one of those categories. And if we're not a yes in one of the categories, I'll have to use my resources and expertise to figure out how we can solve that for you. Maybe if it's not even with the use of our software.
That is an amazing tip, because you got to think, like, again, you address the timeline, you address the authority, all these little details. These are things that, I mean, absolutely could change the game for people's, again, the discovery call. This is everything. I am so glad you're taking the time to bring every little detail up, because an evaluation criteria is literally your roadmap. It's telling you how to get to X marks the spot. Amazing.
That's right. I mean, yeah, it's like a treasure map. So if it exists and they took the time to create it, why can't we take a look at it? And every time, and so usually when I ask that question, they either have it or they don't. If they don't, then I can give them one, because I have the expertise to put one together for them. Hey, let me help you out. We have an evaluation guide that I can send you, and it'll help you figure out which questions you should be asking and what functionality should be there, especially if they're not used to buying software. That's a huge value add that I can give them. Oh, by the way, I can stack the deck heavily against my competitors by creatively crafting that evaluation guide so we get A's in every category, right? But that's a great question to ask. And so usually you either get one, which is like an Excel spreadsheet with all these check boxes on it, and you use that as your template moving forward, or you create one for them and you help become even more of a trusted advisor by helping lead them through the process, right?
Two amazing, valuable angles. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
it's a win-win.
I personally like the competitor component of it as well. You get to the X marks the spot way faster.
Yes.
Game-changing tip. So, okay, let's say we're all sitting around the round table. Everyone loves it. Hurrah, hurrah. You've mentioned demo earlier, but what point are we having the demo? Or let's say we have time for it this time.
Yeah.
When does that take place if you just talked about the closing?
Yeah. So if your demo is part of your discovery call, which sometimes it is, sometimes you have an hour where you do discovery for 30 minutes and the demo for the last 30 minutes, then you would ask the budget authority timeline questions after the demo, right? But you would recap the challenges before the demo. And here's why. This is another rookie mistake that people make. They give a very generic demo. They give the same demo every time they do a demo. They click the same buttons on the demo, and it gets so old and tired and repetitive. But we don't want to do that, right? If we want to be a top performer and we want to make some money, we want to actually differentiate ourselves so that they buy from us more frequently, right? Well, just like we tailor the presentation, we tailor the demo. And here's how you do that. Instead of just saying, all right, turn off your webcams, kick back and eat your lunch, I'm going to take you through a 30-minute demo. What you do is you say, all right, let's recap. So Natalie, you told me that the 3 top challenges you're facing are the onboarding of 1,000 new employees in California. You told me that because California is a difficult HR law state, you're having trouble making heads or tails of some of those employment laws. So you need a little advice there, which our software can do for you. And I showed you that, right? And then we also talked about the need for California specific benefits packages for those employees and how the software can help present those options and help with their enrollment process, right? All huge value adds, right? Remember, we looked at that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, those are really important things to you. And I've written those down on my notes. And so when we jump into the demo, I'm going to jump into those 3 areas first. And I'm going to show you step by step how we do those 3 things. And then if we have any time left over, we can jump into other things that you find interesting or other challenges that you have. Does that sound good?
Absolutely brilliant. That's amazing.
Yes. And now guess what? Time management, right? So some sellers, they like to do that at the end. They'll give a generic demo and then they'll try to go and show the last, like, or intersparse throughout the demo. But if you run out of time, look, here's what happens. Let me let you in on a little inside base. Here's what happens after the discovery and the demo. Your buying committee, they turn off their webcams, they end the call, and then they turn around to each other with their evaluation criteria in hand. And they say, all right, guys, what did you think about Natalie's presentation and demo? Let's go through our evaluation guide and see if we've got our boxes checked. And they go point by point and they check whether or not they think that your software or your services or your offering can do the things that they need done. If you're not yeses on that checklist, they ain't buying your product, right? So that's just like real talk. So why wouldn't you recap before the demo, make sure you're focused on the things that matter most to them, ask them what matters most to them, and try to like pad your chances of getting it right before that call ends. You want to be yeses in all of those categories, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you were the flow master of this discovery call because that is some brilliant advice. Why would you just go through everything else like your typical demo when you can hit the hot spots that you know bring value to them? Amazing.
It sounds like common sense, doesn't it? But it's amazing that 98% of the sales reps out there are doing at least 1 or 2 of these things incorrect. And so like my whole thing is, if you're going to play the game, why wouldn't you play to win, right? So that's why I'm sharing these tips and tricks with the viewers so that they can actually play their best game. They can win the game and they can make more money. And most people in sales, Natalie, that's their angle. They don't really envision themselves in sales for the rest of their life. They have a personal goal that they want to accomplish. They want to escape the 9-to-5. They want to start their own business. They want to become a famous YouTuber, like whatever it is. But sales is just a vehicle to get them there. They're saving up money so that they can invest it in what really matters for themselves, right? So that I'd rather see you guys play to win. So that's why I'm giving you point by point this breakdown so that your discovery calls can be amazing. You'll win more game rounds and you'll make more money. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, I'm processing processing all this, and I can only imagine the people watching this right now. I mean, all the tips. Hopefully, they're taking notes. Otherwise, this one's gonna be a bookmark, and they're gonna.
I hope so. You better be taking notes, people. If not, rewind it back to the beginning. Write this down.
Yes,
now,
but
if the demo's on a separate call, and you asked about the demo, and if it's on the first or a separate call, if it's on a separate call, that's fine. You recap, you go through your budget authority timeline, you ask about an evaluation criteria, but then you use that opportunity to invite more members of the buying committee to the demo. And when you do that, your chances of closing the deal go way up. And then when they get on that call, you start with a recap.
I love that. Okay, so we've even went into demo during it or demo during the second call, but I will tell you one thing that I am hanging on with all the tips and all the gold we've talked about, blowing my mind, even the note-taking tip. I have to say, one thing that we talked about at the beginning of this was the graveyard part, like where the deals go to die. And when we think that we've knocked it out of the park at the beginning, we feel so good. I'm already out with my girlfriend celebrating at happy hour. I think I'm going to get this huge check.
Right.
I'm already in the graveyard. That breaks my heart. Let's talk about that. Why did you pick such a morbid way of describing this important part in the sale? My heart is broken. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, it is heartbreaking, right? And unfortunately, a lot of salespeople get their hopes up. That scenario of celebrating with your girlfriends happens all the time. That's why we have a saying in sales: it's all vapor until it's on paper, right? So until you get that signature, nothing else matters. In reality, when they say, let me show this to my boss, then we'll get back to you, what they really mean is, I don't know what to do from here.
I mean, that's such an amazing observation that I'm sure a lot of people who go through the process, again, it's something that you don't catch and you don't know what you did wrong. And perhaps you didn't even do anything wrong, but it's that one detail because Monica doesn't know, and it changes everything. So that is, I mean, you've shared a lot of hot topics, a lot of amazing tips during this whole entire thing, but that could quite literally change the entire game for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it could.
I mean, knocked it out of the park. First off, I'm going to say thank you on behalf of everybody because we covered everything from how to personalize your presentation. So you're not coming to the table with just something generic, clicking through the slides. We talked about that. You're making those connections with the people at the table before you even get there. You know who's coming, who you should be speaking to. You're talking about their challenges. You're really having that dialogue with them. And we're taking notes during the whole entire time. But then not only that, like we've got the flow of it. We've got the time management. I mean, you covered everything with this discovery call. So first off, thank you. Like I cannot tell you from the bottom of my heart, I know that this brought value to so many people.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I'm really happy. And I know that there's going to be some people out there that this definitely was helpful to them, right? But maybe they're struggling and a YouTube video isn't necessarily, or a show like this is not necessarily enough to get them where they need to be, right?
They want more. You took the words right out. I was like, if people want more, let's say maybe they're not struggling, maybe they're coasting, maybe they're plateauing. Everyone's at different stages. But if someone wants more,
yes,
where can they find you? What do they do next?
Well, yeah, thank you so much for that. And listen, team, if you're watching this video and you are feeling a little convicted, like that's you that we've been talking about the whole time, I would encourage you to go to my website, and I'll make sure, Natalie, that we get a link in the description below.
Absolutely.
And what you're able to do if you go to my website, Phantom Sales, is to book a session with me. And I've created actually an intensive discovery call coaching program, which is intended to completely transform your discovery calls from losing badly to who's your daddy. And we can definitely get you firing on all cylinders. And the great thing is we can do it in just a few sessions. And the way that I usually structure that is I'll have you actually present to me as if I'm the prospect, and I will coach you in real time, and we'll get your discovery calls completely transformed from subpar to outstanding. Okay. And it is going to raise your closed won percentage. And I'm confident that after completing this program, you'll stand head and shoulders above like 98% of the other sales reps out there. So if you're looking to get hired into a sales role, which Natalie, we talked about at the beginning of the show, This will really help distinguish you as a candidate. And here's the bottom line. When you invest in yourself as a seller, you reap a huge reward from it. You'll never be sorry that you did it. And while you're on my website, make sure you subscribe to my email newsletter, where I'll send you my thoughts on trending sales topics based off of how much engagement I get on videos like this. So you'll want to make sure you subscribe to that. It's going to be really valuable.
Absolutely love it. Thank you. I think everybody knows sales is the game and we're here to win the game. So I appreciate you giving us all these different tips and tricks, a way to subscribe with you, stay in touch with you. You guys, you heard the man. Go ahead, hit subscribe. Make sure you follow him across his different social platforms. Follow his newsletter. Greg, thank you so much for being on the show today.
I really appreciate you having me on the show, and absolutely loved our conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.